I've been thinking for quite a while how to introduce this video, how to properly select words to speak about the topic of the video, which is directly impacted by a memorable date for my country today, the date that has been covered in tears and blood, the date that holds a particular symbolism, the date that signifies the necessity to preserve your freedom and stand for what's right, the date that indicates Ukrainian maturity, and by maturity and by Ukrainian I mean Ukrainian people, individuals, and as a nation. It's been exactly 1 year since my country has been at war with Russia. So a couple of days prior to this date, I happened to conduct a lovely conversation with somebody who had previously been on my podcast. Is going to be the first repeated guest on the show, if I may call it a show. A good friend of mine from Canada, Canadian Armed Forces member, well-spoken and greatly educated, highly interested person in politics and war. The person who's been particularly supportive to me personally, and who has been quite evidently expressing his support for my country, for Ukraine. So it was one of those interesting occasions, by far the only instance where I happened to answer his questions. So I hope for everybody who speaks English, it will be highly insightful and representative, and I'm pretty sure it will shed more light to English speakers of what a rotten, shameful embarrassment of a country Russia really is.
So where do you currently reside?
Central Ukraine.
If you don't want to go into specifics,
no, that's fine. Everybody, people who watching it, they know it. It's 80 kilometers away from Kiev. It's a small town. Yeah.
Like north, south? How far?
Probably a bit north, I think, realistically. We've got these regions, it's like we've got big cities, and big cities have regions. And those regions are in turn separated onto something like districts. So basically, there's Kiev. Provinces, something like that. Yeah. So it's Kiev region, because it's 80 kilometers north of Kiev. Yeah, that's right.
Okay, I understand. Okay. So before the war, before the invasion, Western intelligence agencies were warning Ukraine of a massive buildup of Russian troops along the border. It started slow, but then it started ramping up a lot. And eventually they got like 150,000 troops along the border. And for a long time, Western intelligence agencies were raising the alarm and warning Ukraine about this. During that time, did you think a Russian invasion was looming?
I started taking it seriously, unfortunately, when it was scarily upon me. I started taking it seriously, unfortunately, when it happened to be too short before actually taking serious actions in order to personally, prevent myself from being somehow damaged and my nearest and dearest. So those news, the remnants of those news started reaching me at one point, like maybe 2 weeks or 1 week prior to the full-fledged invasion. It got really big. It was basically the main agenda from all sources of information. And I was talking to people, and different people had different information, because it's how it's always been here. Like, at least prior to the war, there were always these loud pro-Russian voices that were quite suppressing often, that said that, oh, that's what the Westerns are doing to suppress our economy, to destroy their economy, because that's what they've done to Mexico. That's what America has been trying to do. So, that's always this sort of narrative that you keep hearing. And, funnily enough, it's not sometimes even from those people who are consciously supporting Russia or USSR or that kind of lifestyle. It's just they've been brainwashed, misinformed, misled, or some of them actually still believe whatever Russia is posing. They just wholeheartedly, luckily it's minority of them, but they they were, and the remnants of the past, like those are usually older generations people, and they still come kind of reminiscent about the USSR, and they do not, but whatever, what can you say about a person who's just been brainwashed?
Information can be dangerous.
Oh, completely.
If I remember correctly, I think it was like 2 or 3 weeks prior to the actual invasion was when I started seeing that Western intelligence found out that they were transporting blood supplies, and they were setting up all these field hospitals all around Ukraine. And when I started seeing that that they were bringing in blood supplies, I'm like,
that's when you understood that it's serious.
That seems pretty serious. So it was about like 2 weeks before the invasion that I'm like, it definitely. Now, after I seen that they had 150 troops there, I'm like, okay, this is way more than. And the whole time they were just saying that they were doing some kind of big exercise. They were preparing for a big exercise. I had a feeling like weeks and weeks, a month in advance, that I had a feeling that an invasion was.
I understand where you're coming from. I do not tend to blame myself or somebody else for not taking the sufficient action, because this past 8 years, it's been locally something like that for all this 8 years. Sooner or later, in the local informational sphere, there were always time to time some sorts of news like that. Oh, they're about to do this, they're about to do that. So, but then at one point, it did become big even for me.
So, once you did start taking it serious, you said about 2 weeks prior to the invasion that you really started thinking about this seriously. Did you make any kind of preparations, like stocking up food?
Sure, water, that was it. I should have taken it certainly more seriously, because sometimes you just get caught in whatever routine, and you just do not whatever. That's on me. That's on me, and that's one of those valuable.
That's a lot of people. That's a lot of people,
and it's one of those valuable and dear, really truly pricey in all respects lessons that lots of people learned from what's been happening. Well, in terms of preparation, I had cash, I had some food supplies. I was contemplating, remember we were having a conversation about the necessity to get the weapon, but then even the probability of me getting the weapon posed even more moral questions, not even moral, but like psychological questions, whether to let the weapon go, and if yes, then when, and should this town be occupied, like what would be the most appropriate scenario to obey to. Because I've talked to some people, good friends of mine who actually serve right now. They said that they live in even smaller town, and their town got occupied. And the reason why the town got occupied and they got it easy is because none of the locals actually protested, and all of the locals were relatively obedient. And of course the Russians, because of that, they surprisingly got all right with that. So nobody protested, nobody caused nothing. However, other instances of just a tiny bit bigger towns and cities where people uprose and people expressed indignation, right, and hatred, it got messy and bloody. And
exactly, and that's why I think, like, in that situation, I think, like, I know resistance is the right thing to do, but I mean, look at what happened in is it Bakhmut?
Yeah, over there. Right? Yeah, it's gone. And it's pretty much gone. Yeah.
Yeah, like I remember you sending me videos of civilians being executed, and it is just it's horrible to watch. It's horrible to see, and probably because they were so resistant to the Russians. So,
and rightly so. I don't blame nobody, honestly. Right?
Oh, absolutely.
I don't blame those who complied, and I don't blame those who had a prize in. It's like
no, exactly, and I think the exact same way. But I mean, without that military power, it was a slaughter. The Russians executed so many civilians, and it's heartbreaking to see.
What was the hardest to observe? I personally have not taken part in any actions like that, luckily, but the hardest to observe And for me, it was hard to observe distantly, seeing it online or watching it on TV, seeing those Russian soldiers from those Chechen soldiers, you know, how they are on the territory of a sovereign country, but that's not the case. Hearing women yelling somewhere on the background, not really seeing, but just hearing women, understand that it's only women that left because all the males have been killed, and hearing women cry and babies cry, and you can imagine what those idiots are doing there, right? So hearing, that was one moment when I think the hatred in me just spiked to the maximum. Hearing some of those women yell and cry and asking to leave them, crying for help, that's unforgivable. You know, I don't think we're talking
it's
about
absolutely horrible.
Forgiveness.
It's absolutely horrible. Another thing that surprised me was the level or the lack of discipline among the Russian soldiers, executing civilians. God knows what they're doing to these people.
They let the whole hell loose on those people, right?
Completely. So as you know, like I've been to Afghanistan. You know, I've been to Afghanistan on combat operations, and I've lost friends in Afghanistan. But I could never imagine doing the things that they do to even a Taliban fighter that we captured, and we've captured Taliban fighters, but I could never imagine doing such inhumane things to another human being. Like, no matter how much you dislike them, hate them, you know, torturing, executing an unarmed person, it's wrong.
Well, they're executing each other, honestly. I don't know if that bit of news reaches Canada. They execute each other. You might have heard about this Wagner Squad, which has been internationally acclaimed, internationally confirmed to be terrorist organizations for their actions, for complete lack of any moral code. And they're killing each other for, I don't know even for what. They just killing each other like that.
And that's why you can't, and for a little while, I don't think they're doing it anymore, but for a little while they were recruiting prisoners.
Oh, yes.
And essentially, you know, some of these people are psychopaths. I don't know who in the right mind thought it was a good idea to give a psychopath an AK-47 and a few magazines.
That's crazy.
Ridiculous.
The head of that, what do you call them? Mercenaries? That's who they are, right?
Mercenary. Well, I mean, yeah, they're called like the Wagner group or something, but essentially the overall term is mercenary. But I mean, at the same time, you know, there's also mercenaries fighting on the Ukrainian side as well.
Right.
Technically, like, you know, we have a lot of Westerners that have traveled to Ukraine and joined, you know, I think it's called the Ukrainian Foreign Legion. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's just a term.
They're not mercenaries. They're mercenaries as well. I mean, from the West, we don't call them mercenaries, but essentially they are.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, like, you know, a lot of them will have like ex-military experience, but there's no way that the Ukrainian army can verify everybody's stories. So, you know, there could be some criminals.
It still remains sort of kind of underground, right? Still remains like that. But the head of this group, this Wagner group, he's openly touring Russian prisons, recruiting. And by recruiting, maybe it's by force. It's not like he's probably giving them a lot of options. He's just taking them, and it's like two options. They either keep rotting in the Russian prisons or they join. But once they join, it's either they die. I mean, there's no glory afterwards, obviously, you know.
So I have a few more questions. So are there many Ukrainians, to your knowledge, who do actually wish to be part of the Russian Federation?
Let me think carefully right now.
You don't have to go into specifics, just in general terms.
Of all the people that I know, there is zero who want to be a part of Russian Federation. However, there might be, now let me be precise, there might be of everybody who I personally and not personally, like virtually know, there might be probably only one person who thinks that, who is a bit, again, reminiscent of the USSR. That's it. And even that doesn't mean that he wants Ukraine to be united with Russia, joined, right? That's it.
And really, it seems like this is all based upon that, the old USSR, you know, Putin. It seems like he just wants to recreate the Soviet Union like it was back in the day.
That's been a great question. I've been thinking about that a lot. One question I've been asking myself is, I think it's highly improbable to me that he's so, I don't know, miseducated, again, brainwashed, to really assume that once Russian soldiers barge into the territories of Ukraine, we will welcome them warmly with bread and salt. I don't know if anybody misinformed him so badly. That's one of the possibilities that some people here have been saying, that the reason why this is all happening is because Putin has just surrounded himself with really wrong people who've been sucking his resources and money, misinforming him. You think that might be the case?
Yeah, I think so. Absolutely. Look at Crimea. Back in 2014, I remember when the invasion took place. Not a shot was fired. They were able to take Crimea without hurting anybody. I seen videos of people cheering. Whether it might have been just a small minority that was cheering. I'm not sure how many people were in support of it, but when they took Crimea, they did it peacefully. And even like when they took over those Ukrainian military bases, they gave the soldiers the option: if you want to stay here, you can, and you can join the Russian military.
Some stayed, some joined.
If you don't want to join, you can head back to Ukraine, because this is now part of Russia. And,
people were killed, though.
It was generally
there
peaceful.
were people who got killed. That occupation, for sure. That I think it probably didn't exceed more than 5 people, but it wasn't completely peaceful. Admittedly, for sure.
So I think when they had this invasion, or their special military operation, I think they were anticipating that exact same thing, because look at this. Look at that massive convoy that was north of Kyiv. It looked like they weren't preparing to be attacked by all these Ukrainian special forces and their scoot and shoot maneuvers. So,
but even that, if we
a lot of these units, that were attacked on the convoy, they're logistical units, units that aren't really trained in being very good gunfighters and being, being very good, I guess, soldiers. So, of course, they weren't able to defend themselves.
But even this initial possible motivation of Putin to just enlarge the Russians' territory is still, to me, to a simple mind like myself, and not just to me, but even this seems completely illogical and even harmful to themselves, to Russia, because what have they started drastically living better after Crimea was annexed, after Crimea was united? Has the life of an average Russian been drastically improved? How has the economy thrived all of a sudden? They've been under sanctions, they've lost some international reputation after they annexed Crimea. I mean, I don't understand what's the point. Look at other European countries Switzerland, right? There are examples of countries who are territorially way smaller than Russia, and show me a guy from Switzerland who dreams of going to live in Russia, and meanwhile, any relatively smart Russian would love to live in Europe, right? So enlarging the territories in the 21st century, that's, I don't know. I mean, I'm not a leader, but even that sounds crazy to me. So his motives, it definitely must be coming out of his obsession, fascination with USSR. He wants to bring that back, at least partly, right?
For sure, yeah. So, what is life like on a day-to-day basis now? We're almost a year into the war. What is day-to-day life like? Are you able to get all the basic necessities?
Yes.
Food, water, medicine?
Myself, yes, definitely. Luckily, I think, luckily speaking, majority of the country has adopted, not to mention these shootings that do happen time to time. And the recent big issue was with electricity, which cannot be not mentioned. It's got to be mentioned because it did bring a lot of issues and a lot of, it was psychologically pretty complicated. But, you just keep thinking about other regions, other people who have had it way worse, who have been having it for this nearly for way worse. So I do not complain. And then you adapt, you learn how to overcome, you calm yourself down. And now when you hear an alert going off, well, what can you say? What can you do? What can you say? You just, you keep living. In case of basic necessities and whatnot, it's all right. It's pretty good. I don't think my life has currently been anyhow problematic because of that. Not to mention probably the psychological and moral facet and aspect of that, right? That's really problematic because the news do reach you and you follow it. And the life has generally been, I will allow myself, if you don't mind, to talk just a little bit about how the life has been changed, how the life of an average Ukrainian has been transformed in this year. We have been awakened greatly nationally. Nationally, we have been awakened from the smallest area of, I'm talking about a well-educated, relatively smart Ukrainian. I'm not talking about those guys on the spectrum, which are plenty of in each country. Well, maybe not plenty, but there are those dumb ones. In case with an educated, intellectual ones, everything has been put upside down. The masks have been removed. Now we see who is who completely. And the smallest area, starting with music, literature, then noticing actually government changes. People have become way more active in terms of petitions, to the president, in terms of actually understanding what politically is going on in the country, just been actively taking part in some political global decisions. And we've been noticing a lot of people to follow, really, a lot of leaders that for me personally previously were totally unknown. Why were they unknown? Because of this huge suppression of Russian media sphere. That was always a big part of that. And whether it was on purpose, partly it was definitely on purpose. And it's only now that we are awakening to the fact and we're starting to see, oh, that's what it is. Yeah. So so the life of an average Ukrainian, what I've been thinking about that a lot. I'm not a hateful person by my nature. I don't like living my life being filled with hatred and loathing, right? But it's just, how can you, that's one thing that I'm concerned about. And I'm thinking about what kind of impact will it have on the future generations that so many Ukrainians are now being born and dying and just hating the whole country. Hating the whole country, it's generational. This trauma goes for generations. So that's one source of concern. But then I go easy on myself because I know, how can I get behind that? There's no way to find a compromise with that, Yeah. So, and another thing, it's like, you would imagine you can still hear a lot of people say that it's about the government. It's only Russian government. I would like to, whoever's going to listen to this episode, even if it's 10 people, I will never be tired of endlessly repeating, it's not just the government. It's absolute majority. And I'm talking from experience. I'm talking from statistics. I have personally talked with those people. I have had them impersonally. It's, it would not be the Russia that we know it itself right now, if not for the support of people. Now, what's the origin of that support? That's questionable, whether it's been imposed on them. However, I had some people that I communicated with prior to last February, and I told them, if I was in your place, I would either escape the country or I would somehow find a way to support Ukraine. And whoever wants to find I don't know, I'm an English tutor. Right? I've been an English tutor. Pay for the lessons, right? I'm gonna send it to some organization here. There's always a way to support it, right? For me, morally. And I would also talk a little bit about Americans. Like, you see, sometimes I'm coming up with this topic often enough, how you keep hearing sometimes from some Americans the fact that we should not send so much money overseas where it's not our business, let them deal by themselves. The image of United States being how they often put themselves to be the most progressive, the best country, right? And I would say probably realistically in some regards it is in terms of the impact on the culture, right? And whatnot. You can't claim yourself to be powerful and the best and just completely stay aside. This is impossible. So if those guys truly believe to be the greatest nation, they can't stay aside. It's just impossible. How can you be, if you it's like a bully is bullying somebody and you just staying at the corner just observing that. So yeah, that's what everybody's got to do.
100%. Yeah, no, I totally agree with you there. I think it is. I mean, we're a democratic nation, same with the, not the right word. Not democratic.
Like freedom, let's say cherishing nations, right? Yeah.
So, we believe in democracy is what I'm looking for. So, I think we have to support those those values and really fight for that because Russia, if they were able to take over Ukraine, who's to say they're not going to keep on going?
Oh, they've
We
been
don't know.
openly claiming their next targets.
You know what I
Poland,
mean? And they have a
Latvia.
track record. They have a track record of, of doing this. Weren't they? What was it in the? Was it in the 40s that
Georgia.
they were at war with Georgia, but also Finland, right?
Yeah. Finland.
Back in
Oh,
the
they lost badly.
30s,
Yeah.
1930s or 40s or something like that. So they have a track record of really trying to push it way too much. You know what I mean? So I think it's the right thing to do to support, and supporting Ukraine is supporting democracy, and I think it's the right thing to do. And I mean, like, yeah, the Americans, they are a powerhouse when it comes to the economy, extremely wealthy. So, yeah, I think it's the right thing to do.
It's an opportunity for Americans as well.
There is people that are gonna oppose the support. You're gonna get that no matter what. During the pandemic, we've seen our countries divided more than any other time. I think, in history, we're so divided these days, whether people want to get immunizations, whether they don't want to get immunizations, whether we should wear a mask, whether they shouldn't wear a mask. But anyways, going back to this conflict, in my opinion, it is the right thing to do to support it.
You keep hearing sometimes some arguments from those pro-Russian people that claim that, Ukraine has become a proxy for the war between America and Russia. It's like this middle land, which nobody argue it isn't. Everybody agrees it partly is. Thanks to who, though, right? Who has...
It's true. It is kind of a proxy war. So you know what? Let's stop it. Let's send NATO troops into Ukraine and help them defend. We're already in this war. Why not go in all the way?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So before, I always wonder this. Before the invasion, we actually had Canadian Armed Forces personnel in Ukraine. I personally know guys that were in Ukraine helping to train Ukrainian soldiers, in the event of this invasion, that an invasion would take place. It was ever since 2014. We had, I can't remember exactly what it was called, but it was an operation where we were always rotating soldiers in and out of Ukraine to basically help train, and so that they could help with the conflict. And I wonder if, and I believe there was also British and American forces there as well, doing the exact same thing. I wonder if we never left, if Russia would have still invaded, because I don't think they want a war with NATO. It's, at this point, it's a war that they know that they cannot win. So, Russia is probably doing everything within their power to avoid a direct confrontation with NATO. So
I don't know. It's a good question.
I wonder if, for example, like when we heard that this invasion was taking place, if all of a sudden we flooded Ukraine with NATO assets, would Russia have gone in?
Yeah. I want to believe not.
So.
I want to believe not. But then Russia isn't famous for making unreasonable decisions. With biting more than they can chew.
True.
So
true.
It's really a conundrum. It's mystery. What the fuck is going on in the brains of those people who run the country?
I really don't know.
I mean, the NATO is pretty close to them already, right? And initiating this conflict that did not push NATO further from Russia, if that was the prime. And their objectives, you probably know how many times during the course of this 1 year of war, how many times their objectives changed. First, they were claiming one thing, then they switched to another. Then first they were saying to us, to simple people, like, throw your president off, it will be easier for us to deal with you. Then they saw that nobody seems to be throwing the president off, and then and then they've been making some compromises. It's crazy, but you see, there is a lesson in that. It's a dear lesson. It's a hard lesson. It's a bloody lesson. A lot of people have been deeply traumatized. I completely understand those people who do not trust the government here. I understand those people because it's easy for me to sit on my ass when it's relatively safe, right? I have not taken part in any combat. but those people who've lost their nearest and dearest and witnessed what they witnessed, it's a whole stain and trauma. Yeah. So
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
and
Horrible.
all for what, all for what? So one thing I do want to emphasize and stress it clearly enough: every single Russian is responsible for that. I've happened to be unfortunate to lead those brainless, pointless conversations during this year with some Russians who said, but you know what? I'm a peaceful person. I'm a pacifist. I don't want neither of you die. I don't want Russians, Ukrainian die. Well, then do something about it. Do something. What do you do about it?
Well, I think, what really bothers me about this whole thing is all Ukrainians right now are suffering to some extent. Everybody knows somebody that's in the conflict, that's been, because the conflict is really happening all over your country. They're dropping missiles all over the damn country, taking out friggin' power plants, power lines, and really terrorizing the people, which again is unethical and it's wrong. We're not supposed to, as a military force, we're not supposed to target civilian infrastructure.
Yeah, they do not obey by any rules, by any codex. There's just, what are you going to push in their face? Nothing,
yeah, but right? What upsets me is that the majority of Russians are going about their daily lives unaffected by this. Yeah, they might have seen stuff at the grocery store a little bit more expensive because of Western sanctions, but still, it's not affecting them whatsoever. So even if this war ends tomorrow, something has to be done to punish the Russians,
yes, absolutely,
to show them that this was wrong.
Completely.
This is not okay, and we can't allow this to happen.
There is a price for being neutral, as they're trying to be, but being neutral really means being on the Russian side, and there's a price for no actions, right? For remaining in the shade.
Now, I want to ask this as well. Do you also think this is a probability that I'm going to ask? So, if the war was to, and this is what I think that if the war even ended today, even ended tomorrow, I think Russia is still going to see the remnants of this war for years and years to come in the form of terrorism.
I would imagine.
In Russia.
For me personally, to me, being as distant as I am from politics and military and stuff, I think probably the best possible outcome for Ukraine is to be part of NATO. I can't see anything else, because then it would be this alliance, how you call it, ally, right? Because being part of some international group that's more powerful than Russia, because what is it? Because what would you do? You can't physically, geographically put them on the other end of the world. Yeah, I don't see a lot of options, a lot of outcomes where Russia is all of a sudden on peaceful terms with Ukraine. No matter who comes after Putin, we're talking about millions of people, generations of people, and it's like I mean, those people, like what has to happen to those people to transform their thinking all of a sudden? I think it would be fair to say that they're quite prone to following the leader. They still have this sort of Tsar, thinking back from the days when they had the form of totalitarian regimes of running the country. So it's commonly like, look at all those public polls, questionnaires on the streets by some journalists, like, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? They all stand for Putin, all of them. 8 out of 10 statistically. So what's gonna all of a sudden happen? If somebody highly democratic comes after Putin, somebody from opposition, I would imagine then there might be uprising. There are no chances of uprising currently. So yeah, we need to join. We need to work on our own strength. Oh, man, but it's a tough one. It's an unfortunate and tough one, have a neighbor like that. Yeah,
for sure. And the thing is too, like, I mean, yeah, ideally we want Ukraine to become part of NATO, but they can't be at war. Like, we can't accept a NATO member that's at war. That's just against the policy. And Russia can drag this on potentially for as long as they want.
Or so there should be some sort of compromise made from us, mostly from our side, right? If we want to compromise it temporarily in order to perhaps potentially join NATO in the future. But then on average, statistically, majority of Ukrainians are not ready for any sacrifice. And if people are not ready, then it's regardless what the government says. People are not ready, it will cause mayhem eventually. So it's a tough one, right? Think about it. So people are not ready for the compromise. Other than that, I don't know what's got to happen other than that.
Yeah. Anyways, with that, man, I got to run. I have a few errands that I gotta do today.
Thanks. Those were profoundly interesting questions. I'm thinking about, probably I will cut this last part of the conversation and I will drop it exactly probably on the 1 year, when it will have been 1 year. I think it will be quite symbolic to drop a conversation exactly when it's 1 year, on 24th of February. Well, listen, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a lot. I promise this time the conversation will be, in terms of audio and video, way better than last time.
Awesome. Sounds good.